Oh, snap.
We're here, we're recording.
Oh, it sounded like you were about to do the theme song for the week. Are you going to do the theme song for the week? Never. All right.
Never.
Well, now I'm going to take inspiration off of yours. Ready?
Okay.
So here, ready? Oh, I don't need that. We're here. We're here. We're here. We're here. We're here. But doop 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 doop. We're here. Ring of fire.
That was very cute in like Steven Universe.
Right. Welcome to Ring of Fire. I'm Emmy the Birth Wizard.
And I'm Alex Bard. This week we have a very, very special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name's Latisa. I'm the creator of PS Love Mommy. I am a doula and birth photographer and doula mentor.
All the titles.
All the titles. And we're so excited to have you here. This is our series called How to Doula It. And this will actually be our season 2 finale. And we are talking about how to get more clients. We'll definitely talk all about you and how you got to that point, but we really want this to be like when you're like a fresh brand new doula, like this little mini series be like where you start kind of thing. So
yeah, because it's so easy to get into this work and then be like, the fuck am I doing?
What comes next?
At that point, then you'll be all right. But then
Yeah.
What in the world is for real?
Right.
Yeah. You're like, what is this? And what do I do next?
It's not too dissimilar to pregnancy. Being like, great, I got a pink line. Now what?
Oh shit. Like there's so much else I have to think about.
Right. So Latisa, you and I have been buds for a little bit, but I want you to be able to tell your story and tell us like how you got here, in particular birth work, because I know you did other stuff before you were in this.
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated with birth. From the first time at 20 years old, seeing my best friend give birth, I was like, whoa, this is cool. And so from then on, and I know it sounds a little weird, but I think other birth workers could relate. Like I would literally be on YouTube watching animals give birth and just anything that would keep connected. Yes, over like the next 10 years, I ended up doing a lot of other things not connected to birth work. But when I started my own family and started having my own kids, that kind of brought me back around to the idea of just being like really interested in birth in general. So my own birth stories are different, not really different. They're pretty chill, but but my journey to pregnancy is interesting. But when I started planning and having my kids, I definitely went against I felt going against the norm of like what my family members did. And so I was just kind of already in that mindset of like, I don't want to do what other people have done. I want to seek my own path. And then, of course, reading about doulas and things like that. And this was, I mean, my youngest is 5, my oldest is 7. So within the last 10 years, I've known about doulas, but didn't really know anyone that was a doula. And after I had my second, that's when I was like, okay, I want to look. Yeah, I was literally searching, if you love birth, what do you do? To support women, what job is that, you know? So I started doing that, and that's really was kind of like my introduction into like, oh, okay, I think maybe being a doula is what I'm called to do. Maybe that's what it is. So I went for it.
So I'm curious, what were the things that you went against that your family members did? Because you said it so clearly there of like, I went against the grain. Like, what were things that were expectations that you were like, nah, no thanks?
You know what? And the thing is it wasn't necessarily like with my birth plan or anything specific. I feel like in that, I've had 2 prior cesareans. I had a surgery before I had kids. And so, to me, I really felt like a lot of my choices were taken away because of that surgery. And I just went into each pregnancy like, nope, let's schedule you at 37 weeks, to have your baby and blah, blah, blah. But for me, like, I cloth diapered, like I breastfed beyond 1 year old, like
Right.
those things that you would think, oh, were things that like people in my family hadn't necessarily done, that I just, by just research and just reading up, like, I mean, my daughter didn't even have like a sucker until she was like over 2 years old, like little things like that,
Yeah.
that I try to be intentional about. Were different than a lot of the people that I knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even the small stuff I find that people are like shocked, like pacifier, why not?
Right.
Yeah.
Even like small things where you're like, oh, wait, I don't know, my kid didn't like them. I tried, I promise. Like, you almost have to justify the not use of certain things rather than justify the use of them.
Yeah, we had that with we baby carried everywhere.
Yeah. My
Which
baby,
is the most beautiful, easy thing.
It was just
easier than a
convenient.
stroller. Like, it's
Right.
so nice to just be like, boop, right? And then you can do whatever you want, but people look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
Or my experience was everybody praised my husband for it. Like, we'd be in public and they'd be like, oh my God, dads wear babies, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I never get any appreciation for carrying this baby.
So fun.
Yeah, even the littlest thing like swaddling. I remember a family member was like, only white people do that. And I'm like, oh, what? Makes no sense what you just said. So that's just like always was like, okay, you clearly do not understand how this all goes, how babies work, but okay. I mean, you only have a few of your own, but okay.
I did hear that in history class, though. Only white people swaddle babies.
I'm like, I don't know, if you get little, that's the first way that they're gonna hand you to them. So I'm like, I don't know, but yeah.
Fun. So I'm sure that was also an experience for you of like crossing cultural boundaries and that kind of thing, of discovering ways to like show your family like, no, it's not a white people or a Black person thing. It's just my choices as a parent thing.
A human thing. Yeah.
A human thing.
Yeah.
That like actually our ancestors, have done this for hundreds of years. You should probably tap into it, but whatever. Yeah.
That's
No
your
biggie.
That's your journey. That's your journey. I'm not here to do your journey.
Yes.
Okay, so those were kind of choices that went against the grain. And I know one of our first conversations was around your birth stories, and you, along with another birth worker that we're both friends with, had beautiful cesarean stories. And it only like affirmed my beliefs of like, these can be great. Like, this can be good times. Like,
yeah, I think the thing for me is that I would have liked, like, hindsight, now that I know what I know. I wasn't a doula at the time when I had my babies, but knowing what I know now, it would have been great to have an evidence-based provider to say, yes, you've had this surgery, and most people who have this surgery, this is the recommendation, but let's take a look at you specifically and see if maybe a vaginal birth is an option for you. I never got those conversations. So it was just like, you've had this surgery, you're pregnant with your first baby, let's schedule a cesarean at 37 weeks. And although it was like, of course, nerve-wracking, this is a major abdominal surgery, I went into it as if it was really the only option at the time. Mm-hmm. Although my provider was friendly and had a great personality, I really did feel like, well, if I don't do this, then I am putting my baby at risk, and I'm putting myself at risk.
Yeah.
So, we planned for it, and it was awesome and I recovered well. And the second time came around and I would joke with my husband, like, I'm just going to go into the forest and give birth to my baby and come back. And no, because I didn't want to have to go into another cesarean. But again, I was faced with those same challenges. And I went to the same provider. So then I was just like, whatever. And, but all in all, it wasn't a traumatic experience for me. It was a beautiful experience for me. And I prepared the best that I could for that type of birth. And it was beautiful. I even have video of the second one. So I'm like, yeah.
I love that.
Okay. And then you figure out through your Google search of how do I support women at birth that there's a word for it, which is doula. Then from there, did you train through somebody? Did you do a thing where you just like hopped in with both feet and you're like, I guess I'll call myself doula now.
Okay.
How'd you get to that next step?
So you just reminded me. So when I was pregnant with my first, I went to a yoga class and the yoga instructor was a doula. So she was the first doula that I met. I'm so glad you asked me that, Emmy, because I would have. She actually ended up becoming my mentor when I did decide, like, hey, I want to be a doula. And she's like, hey, I'll mentor you. I'll teach you everything that I know. Shout out to Nikki Brewer. I freaking love.
Fantastic.
Amazing. She is like such a jewel that people don't realize, like, especially, I mean, she's no longer here in Arizona, but she does travel back and forth for things. But anyway, I love her. And she was like that first connection to the birth world that I had. So she introduced me to people. She taught me how to encapsulate. She taught me everything. She was like, I'll mentor you. I'll anything you want to know, I'm here. Like, I'm your girl. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Because our couple episodes ago, we talked about mentorships and trainings and if people recommended mentors and things like that. And everybody we talked to was like, love my mentor. Absolutely would do that again, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm really passionate about mentorship.
Yeah.
Before I became a doula, my husband and I were first full-time ministers. We went to like seminary together, Bible school, whatever you want to call it. And through that, when you become an ordained pastor, you have to pick a mentor to walk with you for the next 5 years. And I had two amazing sets. We both had two amazing sets of mentors. So I'm like very familiar with that relationship and different life. So being able to have Nikki as I was starting my doula journey was just like, yes, this is what I need. And this is what I want. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about it now. It's like, this is what I'm meant to do. Walk alongside, encourage them, give them to the tools. It's like an expediting type of experience. When you have a mentor, you may have only been a doula for a month, but you may have a year's worth of knowledge under you because of that relationship with your mentor.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think that's amazing because you're bypassing some of that like trial and error you have to do as like a baby doula, when you have someone to be like, oh, no. I mean, you can do that if you want, but it was really bad idea what I did.
Right. I was gonna say, yeah, let me save you the trouble. Like, this is what not to do. But also at the same time, I mean, each of us are gonna have our own journey. And sometimes we do need to have those experiences where it's like, dang, I really did that. Like best decision. You're gonna have that regardless of mentorship, but mentorship can save you from a lot of those moments for sure.
Yeah.
What a cool I guess if you guys are church people, divine intervention kind of moment, like that was definitely something that was put together by a higher power to be like, oh, you want to go into this thing? Let me make sure that it's the most comfortable way for you to transition into it.
Yeah. And that's definitely how I feel about doula work. Like, I had my ministry where I had a circle of women that like I was really close to and really connected to. And so to be able to kind of find that same type of calling and doula work, like with my clients, and now like with my own, doulas that I work with and partner with, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing the same thing. It just looks different, or it's in a different capacity. That's how I see it. So I absolutely love it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So you get mentored. Was it doula work that came first, or was it photography that came first?
Doula work came first. And then I had a really good friend that was a photographer that had just started out. And I had met a local photographer, like within the birth community. And I was like, man, I feel like that would be something I would eventually like to add, to my services. I think that'll be really neat. I love taking pictures. I've always loved the idea of being a photographer. I just, I didn't even know I was going to be a doula. So it's one of those things. And then I think it was about a year in, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And it's so funny. I was actually going to do a post. The first few birth photography clients that I had, I didn't even edit. I didn't know anything about editing.
Wow.
So I would use their camera for births, and then he would edit them for me, which is because I'm like, it's a he, right? But I mean, he's married and he was comfortable, and he's like, yeah, I'll edit them for you, whatever. Right. So even then I was like, should I ask him to edit these both birth notes for me? But it was something I just really wanted to just jump into. And he was actually the first person that was like, Latisa, you really have a good eye. So like, I'll help you with editing and show you, what I know. And then eventually you can, do it yourself. So that's how that came about.
Yeah, that's so awesome. So you had a mentor in that too, kind of.
Yeah.
Editing and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then how was it? So how long ago did you start your business would be my first question, or start doulaing?
November 2017 was when I started doula work. Yeah. My youngest wasn't one yet. She turned one that next January, which is interesting that it seems like, why did we start like
yeah, when they're like little.
Right. Yeah.
I've never encountered anyone who does that. Not me. Not me with a 3-month-old at the DONA training. Not me.
I was pumping at my training.
Yeah, exactly.
So how was it starting out? Was it something that like kind of took off quickly? Did it take you longer to build up? Like, I would love to hear that, because that's definitely before my time and before COVID times. And, I have no idea what it looked like prior to that.
Yeah. So I started in November 2017. That was the year that my husband and I resigned from full-time ministry. Wow. So at the time we resigned, came back to Tempe, because we had lived in Tempe for a few years pastoring, and we were like, we love Tempe, let's go back there. And then I was like, well, then what am I going to do? Like, if I'm not going to be a pastor, what am I going to do? And I was just like, you need to go out and work, make some money, and I'm going to stay with the girls and build my own business. And so
love it.
I have no problems with this. I think this sounds accurate.
Yeah. So I stayed home with the kids, and I just started building my business. And how I got my first client. So we started attending a church here in town, and I was going to this, like, when you're new to the church, you can go to like these classes to learn more about just how to get involved in the church, whatever. And there's people that host different like small groups at their house. And so we were sitting in this class learning about all the different small groups, learning about like the theology of the church, all this stuff. And there's a moment where you go around, you introduce yourself, you say whatever. I hadn't even had a birth client, but I was like, I'm just going to say that I'm a doula. If someone asks me what I do, I'm going to say, oh, I'm a doula. I'm a birth
That's how you
doula.
do it. That's
Yes.
the exact way to do it.
It was the last class, and one of the other couples was pregnant, and she's like, wait, didn't you say you were doing? And I said, yeah. She was like, oh my gosh, like, do you want to come to my birth? I'm due, like, I think she was like 38 weeks. Like, I'm going to be induced, but I mean, if you just like want to be there, then we're totally down. And I was like, sure, I'd love to be there. And I was like, she was considered high risk because she had like this brain injury where she had seizures, a lot of seizures. So she went in with a planned induction to just kind of monitor all that good stuff. So yeah, I went into it. I hadn't even been in a program yet. I do have a certification, but I wasn't even like in any program or anything. I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna do this. I'm a doula. What are things? Okay, I'll get hubby coffee, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was just there to just be a presence for them and to be extra hands for them. And I mean, yeah, that was the first birth that I ever attended. And that may have been the end of, I don't even think that was I started in November 2017. That had to have been like in 2018 sometime.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, you know, that's when I started, but I didn't have my first birth until probably almost like the middle to end of 2018.
It's definitely a slow start.
I'm sorry?
It's definitely a slow start for like, excuse me, I think most doulas is it's hard to get past that like initial waiting, right? And you see that's when a lot of times like people will never finish certifications or they'll kind of fall out of the birth world. And I think it's because maybe they weren't prepared or able to wait out that like time for people to get to know you and know who you are.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's a thing that I would like say to someone is that, I mean, some people are just really eager and they're like, all right, I just finished training. I'm a doula now, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, really, I feel like a big key to being a doula is having the spirit. And I think that's why I was so connected to like, I'm just going to say that I'm a doula from the start because I am. And then things were happening from then on. I wasn't so like, oh my gosh, I need a client. It was just like when the opportunity presented itself, I was just in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
I guess for some it would be a slow start, but I think, I mean, for me, I still had 2 kids under, 3. So
it was slow about your life.
Right.
Yeah, it's quite all right, so, and another big thing is not to expect that people are just going to be so excited for you, and family and friends are going to be like, oh my gosh, I want you as my doula. That may not happen. Don't be discouraged if, that's not the case. The support that you need and that you want, you may not find it in your, immediate circle, and that's okay.
I think that's really important to hear, because like one thing that immediately is pointing out during your story is you didn't say that you were a student doula. You didn't say you were like almost certified doula
in training.
A doula in training.
Yeah.
No, you're a doula. And even more so to like speak to how much of a doula you are, a big part of our job is being patient. And you just got to be patient, and you just got to kind of wait out the ride to see who will be attracted to you or vice versa, and understand the service that you give. And you just explained like your first one was you doing coffee and extra hand stuff. It wasn't you like doing all the crazy positions or being so like in the mix, right? You were there doing the doula work that they felt was necessary.
Yeah. And I was doing my server job up until I was finished with my certification. So I was 5 or 6 births in at that point before I was like, okay, I can quit. I can I can make this work somehow and, try to make this work, because there was a few times where I'm leaving early, or as soon as I'm leaving, someone's telling me they're on their way to their birth center, or like I was really having to balance having a job and, trying to do doula work. So like, it definitely is possible, I also was willing to lose that job. So that helped a lot too, to be like, hey, I gotta go. Someone's in labor.
No.
Oh, can you say that one more time?
I worked part-time at a hotel on the weekends
Mm.
when I started, and I did that for a while. And it did get to a point more inching towards like late 2018, 2019, where I was like, oh, I have like, a few clients on the books. I don't think I could keep on working this job, and be dependable. And then, so yeah, that's when I put in my notice, when things really started picking up for doula work.
That definitely helped the amount of time that I could wait for,
yes,
like wait for more, to get more clients, and clients would pay more and that kind of stuff. It definitely assisted me in that. But it was pretty stressful to be serving people and also like checking my phone to make sure nobody was in labor. So it was finally a snapping point where I was like, okay, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot think about making drinks and people being in labor. So
Yeah.
we're going to have to figure out a way for me to quit this job.
So it's interesting hearing you talk about your timeline, because I became aware of you, Latisa, in 2019, because you put out a thing of breastfeeding photos. And I shared it in a group and I got in trouble. It's cool. It's fine. I'm still a part of that group, but I shared it because I was like, how neat. Someone's doing like breastfeeding photos. I'll share it in this breastfeeding group. And that was my first interaction with you without even interacting with you. And that was in 2019.
What'd you get in trouble for?
Oh, sharing it, because then it's soliciting, even though it wasn't my thing.
Oh my gosh.
But I was like, everyone should know about this really neat thing that they're doing for breastfeeding month. Anyway. So I'm just saying, I was your pal before I was your pal.
I was your fan.
And I have been your fan for a long time. So I that's when I became aware of you. And it was an account that I followed where I was like, wow, look at this person doing the thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's so easy in this work, because I know that the joke is that I'm a local celebrity, and I know I have that effect on people when I interact with them, where they're like, oh my God, she's doing the thing, right? And you're just like, I don't know, I'm just eating a sandwich at this like meet and greet.
I'm a person,
right?
Too. You don't need to say huzzah every time you see me.
But I will say, that's when I became aware of you. So it is interesting hearing your timeline, because essentially you'd been doing it about 2 years at that point. And I know that as you've built from there, in 2020, did you see a big shift with your business because of COVID?
Yes, I saw a major shift. I mean, very positive. I saw growth.
Really? So tell us about that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it took the pandemic for me to book my first home birth. It wasn't until 20 that I even booked my first home birth, which it was like early on. It was like March, like they were doing, but still I was like looking at everybody attending these beautiful home births. I'm like, I want to, it took 2020 to do that, and caught the baby. Birth. Midwife came in like literally 5 minutes later, but it was one of those like, oh, first time mom, and she's doing her thing, but very, very inward, and you don't really notice a lot, and then all of a sudden she's pushing, and we're like, oh, there's a head there. So I think having that experience really helped me to I don't want to sound like like I'm pumping myself up, but that experience.
That's the point of this, by the way, was so you could pump yourself up. That's the point of it.
It helped me to realize that I really was made for this, that I'm good under pressure, and I can be that calm, that peace for families, that when they look in my eyes, they're like, okay, we're good, you know.
Yeah.
And to have it with first time parents, you know, and just everything that happened with that, I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better, you know, first time birth. And I think that just really gave me the confidence to be like, I can do more of this.
Yeah.
And I can't remember when I got like, oh, and I didn't even get fully certified. Had it been in the program, I've been in a doula program, but it took them shutting things down and being like, well, you can't come in unless you're certified. And I'm like, oh snap, let me finish my
Man, pre-2020, how Wild West it was.
Oh, so I didn't even get officially certified until July 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, but in all of 2020, I've maybe attended like 2 hospital births, whereas probably that whole year I attended like over 25 births, most of them at home.
So you saw this like huge growth in like home births. Was
Yeah.
that like intentional on your part, or was that like something that just kind of snowballed?
I think it's just something that 2020 brought on, that the pandemic brought on. People wanted to know what their other choices were, and they wanted doulas beside them to help guide them on choosing providers, you know, choosing midwives, choosing birth centers. And so already at that point, having been in it for 3 years at that point, I felt, you know, confident and knowledgeable enough to walk that path.
Oh.
And so and I connected with a couple of midwives that really liked me and liked the way that I doulaed. And so the recommendations, or like the referrals, I guess, you know, just started coming in. And I think also just being out, and I noticed the more you're in this work, the easier, I guess, I don't know if easier is the word, but easier it is for people to find you.
Yeah.
You know, find you on Google or find, you know, your page or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the timing of everything, how long I've been a doula, how long I've been out there. And then with the pandemic, it just kind of like all happened at the same time.
Yeah. And then you have that compounding of knowledge, and people can see that. And even if you want to talk about like SEO, which is like totally mostly out of your control and nonsense, the longer you're around, the easier it is, the higher you show up on Google, like all that stuff really helps, you know, but you have to give it time. And that's mostly what people are afraid to do or unable to do.
But yeah, so we had a client, what year? And you know what?
2020.
That
was 2020.
Oh my gosh. So I don't even know how it came, how the recommendation came. I think it was probably from Dewan, which is, was it? Yeah. So Dewan is like one of the first doulas that I like met and connected with. Like literally, that's my sister. And I think she just got this inquiry, but she was due like any minute, like within 2 weeks or something. She was like 37 or 38 weeks. And so she was like, Latisa, can you take her? And I was like, I don't know. And then we were talking with Emmy, and we're like, okay, maybe Emmy and I can tag team this, you know? Cause I think, yeah, we had other clients due around that time. So it was just like, okay. So Emmy and I met with her at her first prenatal. And she was giving birth at a birth center, first time mom.
It was the hospital.
No. She
was the hospital.
She was with the birth center, but her birth was going to be in the hospital with their midwives. So we're like, okay, cool. So she goes into labor and I'm available. Okay. So I go and see her, and we're laboring at home. And this is what I love about doula work. Like, I hadn't been with her long, as far as like, literally she hired us at 37 weeks, 38 weeks. But there's something about some clients, when they see your face, you know what I mean? When they know you're there, it really gets real. And that oxytocin, you know? So she sees me and we're laboring in her bedroom. And this is a mom, pretty much, I'm not sure if she was with the father, but she's not married. So single mother, young, like early 20s. And she was living with her, her parents and her sisters and stuff. But I don't think she wanted him in the room. So that's why she wanted a doula, because she's like, this is the first time I'm doing this. I want someone who knows who knows what they're doing, who have seen this, that would be comfortable. So we're like, okay. So we're laboring with her. I'm laboring with her at home. And I can tell, like, soon after I got there, like, things really started picking up. So she's laying on the bed, and then she goes into the restroom, and we're laboring in the restroom. And then that's like, the toilet. It's like, I love the toilet. So, so like, she's on, I don't even think I even knew about that, honestly. I think she was just maybe going pee or something. But then she just really started to feel, like, things really just started, like, those contractions started coming back to back, coming longer and longer. So at this point, I had only been with her, like, maybe, I know it was less than 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half. I was with her at home, and I was like, okay, I think it might be time for us to start heading towards the hospital, because the hospital was still like 30 minutes away. And so I have her call the midwife, and the midwife's like, well, first time mom, so blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, but I feel like she's like there, like, things are happening. And so she says, don't go straight to the hospital, bring her to the office first. It's right down the street from the hospital. So bring her to the office, and then if she's good to go, then we'll go to the hospital. So that's where I was like, are you sure? Like, should we just, like, meet you at the hospital? And she's like, no, first time mom, blah, 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 it's fine. I'm like, okay. So we get off, and the plan was, I think it's common practice, like, you usually don't ride with your clients, you follow them in your car. So that was the plan. But her sister was supposed to take her, and her sister was nowhere to be found. Her sister was not at the house. She was on the road somewhere. So we called the sister, and the sister's like, oh, I'll be there in 10, 15 minutes. And I'm like, we don't have, So I said, you know what, it's fine. I'm going to take you in my car, get in the back seat, get comfortable, just do your thing. I even told her, I said, if you have to reach down and catch your baby, then that's just what you're going to have to do. She was like, okay. And so car ride. I'm driving, I'm on a freeway, still trying to be safe, but also I'm,
picking up speed.
And she's in the back seat, and she's like, my vagina, I'm like, everything's gonna be all right. Doing so good. I'm like, you're doing great. Everything's gonna be great. She's like, my vagina hurts. Like, literally, this is what she's saying. I'm not exaggerating, but she was there. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, please let us make it to this place. Please let us make it. And so we get to the midwifery office, and I open up the door, and I go, and I'm knocking on the door, and I'm like, I don't think she's gonna make it out. And the midwife was like, well, I think you would rather her have the baby in the office than in your car. And I'm like, bet, you're right. So we literally picked her up. Like, I have an arm and a leg, and the midwife has an arm and a leg, right? And we're carrying her inside. She grabs the back of my neck and is like, we go down on our knees. 5 minutes later, the baby's out.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, let me tell you guys, this is a first time mom. She was so happy. Like, she was so happy. She's like, I really didn't want to give birth in the hospital. And she was like, I'm so happy that it happened this way. And I'm thinking, this is like amazing. And so, yeah, she had the baby right there on the like sitting area. I mean, the midwife had time to get like some Chuck's pads as much as she could under her. But I mean, a few pushes and the baby was out, and it was just like the most craziest, like most beautiful story.
That's such an awesome story. I love it.
So I do remember this part. They ended up calling the parents and being like, hey, we just need you to come to the office.
Yeah.
Like, just to check on her. And then you guys are going to drive her to the hospital. There was some setup, and Latisa took pictures of the parents being surprised.
That so he was there. Oh,
yes, the boyfriend, her mom, and her sister. Let me tell you, because you see, she got to the place and gave birth, and then they roll in about 5 minutes later. I'm like, she would have had this baby in the car. I'm like, no way. But they're like, what? Like, she had the baby?
They're the most beautiful photos, though. Like the best, like surprise photos, and that mom looks so like joyous in it.
Yeah. So yeah, that was one of the ones I was like, I have to get photos. I have to get pictures of this. So
all right, let's get back on track though.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. I love that story, and I'm really glad you told it. So we talked about kind of shifting into like a lot of home births.
Yes.
So is that your goal, to like stay there? Like that's where you're kind of killing it? Like, is that where you're gonna stay, kind of thought?
No, I've here's the thing, guys. I don't have the privilege to say that I'm only going to attend home birth. And on a real level, it bothers me when doulas are like, I'm only going to attend home births. Because I think a part of being a doula is, obviously there's things that, like, you know, we can become traumatized in certain experiences as well. And I know that sometimes being in a hospital setting can be hard on some, and it's hard to see certain things go down. But just for me, I feel like a part of being a good doula is not only preparing yourself, but also preparing your clients for X, Y, and Z, right? And women that choose to birth in the hospital deserve great doulas as well. Yeah. I mean, I think for anyone who experiences both, yes, you're gonna probably more so favor home birth. It is a lot more relaxed.
Unless you're Emmy. Emmy is the only person I've met who's like, I'm good on home births. I don't have to be there.
That's like, yes. So am I more comfortable in that setting? I think anyone would be when you've experienced both. Most people would be like, oh yeah, I absolutely love home birth. I love birth centers. Awesome. But for someone who serves a variety of like cultures and people and races, which I feel so happy that I can say that, I feel like I would be doing a disservice to my community to say that I only attend home birth. Not everyone can give birth at home. And me personally, can easily be one of those people that would, but not, you know, but be high risk or risk out of home birth, or it not even be in a conversation because of finances or whatever. And like a part of being a great doula, I need to be able to serve in all spaces.
Which that's exactly how I feel. And what I say very often is that it is very interesting when people are saying, well, just everybody should try home birth. Everybody should be at a birth center, when there is so many layers of privilege to be in those spaces.
Yeah. And honestly, even as a doula, to say that you will only attend births in a certain space, that in itself is privilege there too, you know? And it's like, no, I can't. I can't put myself in that position.
So then my next question would be where, because if for anybody listening who doesn't know, Latisa just recently expanded her operation. So you have 4 other doulas with you now? Is that right?
So there's 4 of us all together. And how this all came about was that I was having a very hard like family situation in 2021. And so I really had to start thinking about like what life with my kids was going to be like, what doula life was going to be like, and how could I still do both, whatever. So I even started looking at becoming a birth assistant. I looked at becoming just a postpartum doula and working for another agency that was already established and in town. And even looking for work outside of birth work. And every time, like in every one of those scenarios, I was just like, I would just get anxiety, like, oh my gosh, I can't see myself working a 9 to 5, like just little things. or like, why am I going to work for a different like agency or collective or group? Like from when I first started PS Love Mommy, I intentionally named it something outside of my own self because I envisioned that maybe one day it would become bigger than me.
Oh.
So that's why I didn't want to just say Latisa, Doula, or whatever. So I came up with PS Love Mommy. And so in 2021, and then just facing, this crossroads of like, okay, where am I going to go from here? And looking at all of my options, it just didn't sit right with me to like join another group. It didn't sit right with me to completely not be in birth work. And so I'm like, well, what can I do? And I had a client send me a text one day, just randomly, a past client, another one that she gave birth at home accidentally, and I caught her baby. She texts me and she's like, hey, I've really been thinking about, becoming a doula. I think that's something that I really want to do. And I wanted to know if you would mentor me and if you had any recommendations on programs on how I can get trained. And I was like, oh, so having that text come in, I'm like, well, I pretty much already have like a well-oiled machine going. And I had been thinking about it for a few months, but in my mind, I was like, I don't have the volume, like I don't have the clientele to like, for me and another person, or, I just thought that it just wasn't going to work. How am I going to get her work? I don't know how that's going to work. But I was just like, hey, like, I'll definitely mentor you. I'm looking at doing something myself. I've been thinking about it. And so just be patient with me and I'll let you know like what my ideas are. And then, so it started with her. And then, yeah, like within a few months, I had other people. Well, no, Emmy was like, hey, because me and Emmy always talk and she's like, okay, you're telling me what you're thinking. I think I know someone that would be, great that you should talk to and see if she would be interested in joining your team. And I'm like, okay. And so that's just kind of like how that all happened. And so now there's 3 doulas that I guess, I don't know what to say, hired, recruited. But I intentionally did it with a mindset of like, I want to take newer doulas, like doulas that are starting out. I want it to be a mentor relationship where I can like pour into them. They're going to be representing my name, my company. And so I want to not make carbon copies of myself, but I really want to pour in them the spirit of what it means to be a doula and be a phenomenal doula at that. And let's grow this thing together. And so I spoke with each one of them and they were super on board and loved the fact that they can get mentorship while also getting work and not having to worry about all the business aspects of being a doula, and they can just doula. And that's how that started.
Which is arguably the worst part of being a doula, is the business side of it.
Yep. Yeah, and I like the business side, and I fucking hate it.
It's so terrible.
And I think it makes so much sense for the way you expanded yourself of just off of like the conversation up until this point, in this spirit of mentorship, in this spirit of growth, in this spirit of like truly love, right?
Yeah,
like
the spirit of being a doula.
right. Of service and service to others, and they're ready to serve others because you're serving them. And I think that's like really admirable, because it's not a model that I see very often inside of like agency or collectives.
Oh.
There tend to be a like, serve me and then maybe I'll serve you kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course we talked, but it's also neat to hear your story, like from your perspective.
Well, and here's the thing, you can get certifications and all this stuff, but there's still so much more, in my opinion, to birth work, and specifically being a birth doula, that certifications just aren't going to teach you, you know. And you know, whatever someone tells me, like, oh my gosh, I want to be a doula, I love babies, and I was like, well, then maybe being a doula isn't right for you, because you need to love women, you need to love mothers, you know, not babies. If you
like
want,
never spend time with babies.
I get really uncomfortable when people
Yeah.
hand me their babies. I'm like, please don't hand me
You
this.
almost never see babies, spend time with them, hold them, like, and I would even say that's okay, go be a postpartum doula, go become a newborn care specialist. Like, there are places where you get to spend time with babies. Birth doulas is not one of them.
Yeah. And so, like, I mean, I love the babies, you know, but that is hard. Do I hold babies or anything like that, like involving, I mean, I'm just taking their picture, essentially. That's the most like interaction I have with newborns, like with what I do. So I mean, even in postpartum, unless, you know, my client isn't like, hey, you know, can you please hold my baby? Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. But that's not the job, you know. I mean, there's like that little quote, but like, you know, we're taking care of our birthers. Like, that's the most important thing. We're taking care of our families who are walking into this, and they need that guidance. They need someone to, like I said, they need those kind eyes to look into and know that like everything's going to be all right, and you're the boss in this whole thing. So do your thing, you know.
I really feel my job as a birth doula is to hold parents, not
Yeah.
because so many people want to hold babies. That's great. But they really aren't very funny and like don't tell any good jokes. So I'm not interested. But
there's no shortage of people who want to hold baby and see baby and be around baby.
Yeah.
And it's very easy as a pregnant person to feel like
no one's there to hold
no
you.
one gives a shit about you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're just there because you're pregnant with a baby and you gave birth to a baby, and that's it.
Right. That's what doulas are. And I believe that's what postpartum doulas are. Like newborn care specialists, you know, sleep therapists, all that's a different sector.
Yeah.
But we're there to hold parents.
So we've talked about expanding, we've talked about like how you got into this. Now I'm curious, since we are doing this series of like how to doula it, of talking to new doulas, what are those tips that you would say about growing and getting clients and maybe even finding your way into this work? What are those like tips that you would suggest around finding clients, around like that growth? Maybe you do like your top 3 tips. We'll do it that way.
Top 3. Well, I think one of the first things that I found helpful for me, that I think has even helped, you know, my doulas that I'm with now and other doulas that I've mentored, is that find the community around you, even ones that you're not necessarily a part of. A lot of times we want to start in our own community, but like I said earlier, the support that you're looking for, you may not find. You may not find in your closest friends. You may not find in your family, at least right away, because they may be skeptical of like, let's see what you're, or you may have a super supportive family and that's where it starts. But whether it's like social media, starting in Facebook groups, in Arizona, I feel like we're very blessed to have a very established birth working community. So it can be very discouraging as a new doula to pop on to like a mommy's group and you see a post of someone looking for a doula, and then there's like 50 responses of like, hey, I'm a doula, right?
Right.
There's like 100 responses in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of insane. You at some point I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stop looking. I'm gonna stop looking at these posts.
I tell my doulas, still comment, still put the link, because if it's not the original poster, it may be someone else that sees you and is like, oh, I've seen them a couple of times. You start to create a presence. And I've gotten a few clients that way that just saw me post and it wasn't the original person. And they're like, oh yeah, I'll
And sometimes that person who's looking through the comments is looking for someone just like you. And that original poster wants nothing to do with someone like you.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've left Huzzah and people have been like, ignored it, who was the original poster, and someone else has been like, oh my God, I love that you say that. Like,
yes. So I would say that's one, as far as, social media. Don't get discouraged by the hype or what other people are doing. I think that that's something that's really important. And be yourself and kind of fake it till you make it, to be honest with you. Like I told you the story, with photography. I borrowed a camera for literally the first year of being a birth photographer. It wasn't even my camera. And I was so embarrassed because I even had someone like, oh, what kind of camera do you use? And I'm like,
This one.
What software do you edit with? And I'm like, oh my gosh.
red alert. They're going to know that I'm a fake. They're going to know I'm a fraud.
Yes. And I've had like situations like that. But the determination, I said, I want to be a birth photographer. I want to be a great birth photographer. I'm not there yet, but I'm going to put in the work and I'll get there. Same with being a doula. I'm going to call myself a doula and then I'll eventually get there and get to a place. So definitely finding that confidence as a business owner in general, because it's easy to get snuffed out. It's easy to like start something and not get the results that you want right away. And then just feel like, okay, I'm done with this. So be patient. You may not even book in the first 6 months. You may not even book in the first year. Some people who do are great. I know my experience was different than a lot of people. It took me a while to get that first client. And I would say probably my first 3 clients were pro bono. Which that's a whole other story, but
that was my experience as well. It was a while to get my first free clients, like the ones I wasn't charging for. And then it was even longer to get my first paying client. Like it definitely took some time before I was making any money.
And I've cooperated that same narrative. It took me 9 months, 9 goddamn months to even like have one person, and it was me gifting her my service.
Yeah.
I was like, no, you're not going to the hospital by yourself to birth by yourself.
I
will be there. And then from there, I finally got the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And so just be patient, really patient.
And I love to hear you talk about kind of faking it till you make it, because that's what Emmy was saying earlier about people being student doulas and doulas in training. And like, what does that mean? At what point do you feel comfortable to just say, I'm a doula, like, period? Like if you can't start out with that confidence, how are you going to step into a birth space and have that presence that you were talking about? Because that you need some confidence for that.
Yeah. And sometimes it may be the head confidence, that knowledge. I don't think you need to have your first birth, to call yourself a doula per se. Like I said, I didn't have my first birth. And some people want to wait until that first birth to say like, okay, now I'm a doula. But until get there, what else are you doing? You know, what else are you doing? Because the first birth isn't everything. And what if that first birth is something that is, you know, it didn't go as well as you wanted it to? And really the knowledge behind birth and experiences and, you know, just dealing with people in general is going to help, you know, and is going to help you in that first birth. So even before you attend a birth, like, you know, get into a training, find other doulas in your community, just listen to their stories. And I think that's something that, even though it's not directly correlated with booking a client, get into your community. If there are midwives or other doulas or the freaking baby store, go to Baby RS. It's maybe closed or whatever. But, you know, like, put yourself in spaces to become familiar with the people that you're most likely going to be getting referrals from or that you're going to be working with. And I think that's something that really helped me and other doulas in our community, is like just started going to just different events and meeting people and getting connected with people. Because you may start out as a backup doula and say, hey, you know, I connect with you. I think like we vibe. So, hey, if you need a backup doula, then I'm your girl.
Yeah.
It may be finding someone more experienced to say, like, can I shadow you sometime? You know, whatever. It may be that way.
Yeah. I think that's all great. And, you know, we talked to someone else who like coaches other doulas, and that's what she said was community is so key. And it's interesting because even in the story you told, where you told people you were a doula and that's how you got your first client, if you're not calling yourself a doula in your communities and in the spaces you're in, how is anybody going to know? Right? But maybe you say it in that group and then they say, oh, I know a doula. Right? And then it kind of leads into that like ripple effect.
And she said it inside of a community space.
Yeah.
So even more so, like, it wasn't just like I'm going to post it as my name on my Facebook account, like Doula Emmy, right? Like, you were saying it in a community space for that information to be shared inside of that community.
Yeah. And I think the essence of being a doula is being able to serve and being able to put other people's needs before your own. So even before you book your first client, being able to like sit in what that looks like and feels like is so important. Like, if you don't have that, then you really got to do some work if you're going to be in this for a long time and enjoy it. But if you genuinely love serving others, that is like the foundation of what you need, and everything else is just like a plus. And so I think that's why I was so confident in it, because I'm like, hey, I know how to serve. Like, you know what I mean? Be there for people. So at least I have that. I can put that in the forefront, and the knowledge around birth and the experience around birth, it'll come as it should. But the foundation of what I need, I feel like I already have. So that's what I'm going to lead with. And I think that's something that really helped me.
I think that's great advice. You know, how many doulas are trying to learn everything they possibly could ever know about birth before they get into a birth. And in my opinion, especially for new doulas, there's someone in that room that has that knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. It's not your job to have the knowledge of a doctor and a nurse, because otherwise you would be a doctor or a nurse instead of a doula, right? Like what you said earlier about presence and like people just knowing that you have them, like you are there to help them and serve them, is like, that's magic in itself. Before you ever talk about the stages of labor or put them in a spinning babies position, like that is like the foundation of why people love their doulas.
Yeah, it's the support. And that's something that my mentor told me too. She said, doulas know too much. They're like over-educating themselves. She's been for over 20 years. That was one of the first things she's told me. She's like, Latisa, don't go down that road. And I think that's why when it comes to like midwifery and stuff, I'm like, no, that's not my lane. Like, I'm good. You know, I'm good just being a doula. But that was one of the first things that she said to me. And it really like resonated with me, because I'm really not genuinely a person that feels like I need to know it all. And she was just like, the basis of what we do is support. Like, you just need to be there for them. They just need to know that you're there. And she said, yeah, she's like, I'm sorry, but she's like, some of these doulas, they just know way too much. Like, they're playing doctor, they're playing nurse, they're playing like lactation consultant. And she's like, it's just ridiculous, And she's like, don't be that doula. And I'm like, okay, I won't,
I feel like you're talking straight to me, Latisa. Thanks for calling me out.
Would you consider yourself a too educated and overeducated doula?
I find myself very attracted to finding out all the info. And that's why I'm in the space that I am in, is because I was like, well, what do I do with this knowledge? I guess I'll go start a business.
And part of like building the community in general, because everybody wants to be the one, right?
Right.
But for me, I'm like, I may not have the answer to that, but I can point to someone who absolutely does and who has the proper knowledge and skill set to help you in that. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. You don't have to be everything to everybody. And I don't know, that's just something that I think is very important. And especially now, because we're so hooked up on nowadays, with like certifications and stuff like that. When I first became a doula, that wasn't really something that was like, I felt was really a thing. It really wasn't until the pandemic, because now they were like, well, you have to be certified in order to get into the hospital. Before that, like when I started, I mean, I feel like 2017 wasn't that long ago. And there's people who
But it was.
Yeah, it was the whole pandemic ago.
But it was.
Like my own mentor, she's like, I don't have a proper certification. She's been a doula and birth assistant for over 20 years. And she's like, it's not really necessary. Again, going back to like that essence and that support of birth work, as long as you have that, that's the foundation, right? But yeah, that wasn't really like a super important thing. And it wasn't something that hospitals asked for. I know someone who just became a doula in 2001 would probably be like, what? It's like, no, I was never asked for anything as far as certification or proof of anything until 2020.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great perspective to have, because I think that's part of why I've gotten caught in that trap. Like, we literally just did an episode of me explaining all the different educations I went through, and I called myself out. I spent $6,000 my first year getting all the education. Essentially, I have the equivalency right of an associate's degree in doula work. But here's the thing, and it's because I had nothing to do for 9 months.
Yeah.
It's not like I could go meet people. We were in the middle of a pandemic. It's not like I could go like to community events. My outlets for starting my business were education and showing up on boards.
Yeah.
So I was going to fill my time doing something. But
that's fair. Yeah.
Because like you started in 2019.
I started in 2020, January 2020.
Yeah. So there's 2020, right?
Right.
And I started a few years earlier, and I could tell you, I've not spent near, like, even with birth photography, which I feel like is probably the biggest expense that I've made, but between like birth photography, placenta encapsulation, certification training, and I'm probably all in under 3,000 for sure. And this is like over the span of like since 2017, the things that I've invested in to like make myself. Girl,
I'm telling you, I have sugar daddy money, so it's okay.
I got money to burn.
I married a cute boy, and he thinks I'm sweet. So, but I think that what you're saying is so important for especially doulas now, because they're probably being brought up in the same kind of mindset I was of like, well, I can't go to community events, I can't do this, I can't. So I'll start collecting certifications like they're Pokemon, right?
Well, and I've really talked about it before. I think when I talk to doulas, new doulas, I feel that they think there's a certain number of trainings, number of certifications they think that people be like, cool, you got all the things, I'll hire you. Like they think, or there's a certain level where then they'll feel like a doula, right? Which is what I'm always like, no, you're already the doula, like stop.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
Like, I don't know if I've ever had a client ask me, I mean, I've had on occasion someone ask me like, are you certified? That really didn't come until 2020. Like, hey, are you a certified doula? Obviously, because they want to make sure I can get into the hospital with them.
Right.
I've never had someone ask me specifically which doula certification I got.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never, I used to get the question of how many births have you attended? And
How many births have you attended, Latisa?
no, your response to that question really cracked me up.
More than you?
Yeah.
That's what I tell people, more than you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great response.
I hardly get that question. I hardly get how many births have you attended. Now I do get, hey, this is my provider. Are you familiar with them? Have you attended a birth at this hospital? Those are questions that come. But as far as like, how long was your training? How many hours did you put in? Who were you trained by? All that. When it comes to those questions around the education and certification, not that people shouldn't ask, but really they're getting the essence of like who you are and do we buy? That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Can you support me? Do you have the knowledge? Some will ask specifically, are you hypnobirthing trained or
if they're looking for specific.
Yeah. But in general, it's not as important as you would think it is.
Yeah. I think that's great. All great advice for baby doulas, because I hear that all the time. It's like, oh, maybe another one. And that's what we talked about in our trainings episode, was like, people just start collecting them. And I really wonder if in a consultation, they're like, okay, let's go through the list. I certified here, I trained here, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. And if they think that will give them maybe a leg up on somebody else they interviewed, because I believe it's the vibes. 100% it's the vibes. And I will tell people that I'm like, we all kind of train from the same places in similar ways. Yeah, there's going to be differences, but the most part, like, do you want me at your birth? Like, that is the basic question. Are you going to feel comfortable? Am I going to make you feel safer? Are you going to be comfortable, yelling at me? Are you going to be comfortable asking me for things? Like, all of those things, like, play into it. Yeah. Far more than education and stuff like that. So
I have a curiosity question for you, Latisa, because off of this vibes question, and Alex and I have talked about this off camera. Now, in hindsight, we should do a whole episode around ideal clients. Who typically contacts you? Who's like the client that you are like, how the hell do these people keep finding me? How is it always the same person? For me, it's engineers constantly. Like, I can't not have an engineer hire me. Like, when I'm in a consultation and they're like, oh yeah, my husband's an engineer. I'm like, sold, you're going to hire me.
I know it.
Like, that is so funny. You're talking about who I specifically attract?
Yeah. Who do you attract?
Huh?
Who do you attract?
I more so like the energies that I get is someone who's looking for a Christian doula.
Okay.
They're like, no whatever to anybody else, but birth work can be a lot of things. Yeah. There's a certain, I guess, like stereotype that doulas have, that we're like something, we're working with all different kinds of other things. So for I don't know, I guess I have a lot of, I just say believers, but I have like a lot of people who identify as Christian, who love Jesus, that they're like, I want someone who's going to feel comfortable to like pray with me at my birth, or to just bring that spiritual energy to their birthing space. And then women of color, which honestly, it took me a while.
Really? That's surprising.
Which It took me a while before. I mean, I had one of my first few births. It was a coworker, single mom, and I was there for her. But as far as like someone intentionally like seeking me out and wanting to hire me, I do get a lot. They're like, I just want someone who looks like me to be in my birth space, like, and to support me and be in my corner. And it's like, okay, then I got you. So women of color, and I don't know. I would say those are the two major things that stand out. And it hasn't been like that the whole time. Like, I mean, I've served like families who were Muslim, families who were atheists, like, you know, families who like supported certain parties, you know, like I'm like so proud of that. Like, I've been hired by clients where I'm like, why did they hire me? But I think it goes back to like, they just want me at their birth.
Yeah, for sure.
And so all different backgrounds, colors, and I'm really, really proud of that.
You should be.
That's awesome.
Well, I think this is the part where you plug everything you're doing and we make sure that you're really shouted out so everyone can follow you, because as I feel like a big presence you do have in the birth community, you don't have enough people following you. You don't have enough people following you.
Okay, but that would be my other tip. You know, I do feel like I've achieved a level of success that I'm proud of.
Yeah.
Of course, I'd love to be like, you know,
there
fun, up and up. But I don't think that my followers or my social media, it doesn't reflect what's going on behind closed doors, I guess, you know? And
that sounds like you're too busy to be on social media. Is what it sounds like, which is the dream.
I'm like, oh, I really want to go live, but I really want to do this right now. So I try, but yeah. And I have to keep on telling myself that, because culture and society would tell us different. Like, oh my gosh, if you don't have this many followers, what are you doing? Are you really successful? Are you really good at what you do? And I have to keep on reminding myself, like, it doesn't match, and that's okay. But yeah,
and I say that because I feel you should get more hype from people, not because you need to be hyping up your social media. Just be clear, this was not like a homework assignment for you. This was like homework for the people listening.
Yeah. Like, oh no, I'm like jealous because I would love to abandon social media. But I think that's all the questions I have. Yeah. So tell us what you're doing, about your agency, mentorship, anything that you're doing. We'd love to hear it.
Yes. So just like overall, I have 3 doulas that I'm working with. They're amazing. And, you know, we're currently taking birth and postpartum clients. We also do placenta encapsulation. For me personally, I'm not taking birth clients right now because I'm also growing my own human right now.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, literally, I did 3 births while pregnant, and I'm barely like halfway in, and I'm like, I can't.
I don't know how people do it. I could not.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
This is a whole different level, being pregnant and being a doula. And so, yeah, I just finished up my last birth next week. So in lieu of that, of course, supporting my doulas that are still, you know, taking birth clients, I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on photography. So I will be posting soon. I'm going to be doing some spring minis in April for any families who want to get that done. And also this next weekend, I'm going to be teaching a comfort measures class. And so we're going to try to do that every like few months, every quarter, if not like at the most, like every 6 months or something. But I will be teaching the comfort measures class this weekend here in Tempe, photography. And we're also going to have a yoga class starting in May So that's going to be exciting, but definitely follow us at PS Love Mommy on Instagram. It's probably where we're most present, but you can also find us on Facebook as well at PS Love Mommy. And I try to post there as often as I can, but yeah, sometimes it's, but we got our spring calendar out there. So definitely go and you'll see the spring calendar for what's coming up.
Yay, that's so awesome.
Thank you, Latisa, for coming and joining us.
You're so welcome. We have to get together in person.
Of course. Of course.
Can I be invited?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, this was Ring of Fire. I'm Alex Barr.
And I'm Emmy the Birth Wizard.
See you next season.
Bye.
So are you guys taking